Anthropic's watermark adds nothing to your text. Not one character, not one hidden token, not one byte of metadata. Word counts don't move, the price per token doesn't move, the latency barely moves. Paste it into Notepad, strip every format, and the mark is still sitting there because the mark isn't in the text. The mark is the text. And on August 11th, 2 days after the story broke, somebody shipped a tool on GitHub to remove it. That repo hit 4,102 stars in 48 hours, selling the removal of a signal that no member of the public can currently measure, because Anthropic hasn't released the detector yet. By the end of this video, you'll know exactly how you hide a message in ordinary English, the one line in Anthropic's own API docs that developers should be reading a lot more carefully, and why the thing you should actually be worried about is not somebody removing this mark, it's somebody adding it. So here's the mechanism. When Claude writes, it doesn't pick the next word. It picks from a list of next words, each with odds attached. The weather today was cold and overcast, gray, damp, all fine. Sugary? No. Normally the tie gets settled by a random number. Watermarking changes one thing only, where that random number comes from. Instead of an arbitrary generator, it uses a secret key mixed with the last few words already written. Same word, same sentence, same quality, different source of randomness. Anthropic's own analogy for this is a game of Monopoly played with the digits of pi instead of dice, starting at the 1,012,845th digit after the decimal point, which happens to be a 6. Play looks random, but if you know where the game started, you can check the move log against pi afterward and prove it wasn't. It's a good analogy, and I want to keep it, because the thing it hides is the whole story. It hides the die. Because the interesting question at every step is not what the die rolls. It's how many faces the die has. Ask Claude to describe a sunset, and it's holding a 20-sided die, a dozen adjectives, all defensible. Ask it what Isaac Newton's famous book was called, and after Principia, there is exactly one acceptable next word. That's a die with one face. You can rig a die with 20 faces. You cannot hide anything in a die with one. Now, before we go further, kill the two things everyone assumes this is. The first is invisible characters, swapping a normal space for a lookalike Unicode space in a secret pattern. Cheap, and one find and replace destroys it. Anthropic says explicitly it isn't doing this. Nothing is added, no hidden characters, no extra tokens. Which is worth remembering when you look at what the removal market is actually selling, because at least one of the popular cleaners does precisely this. It strips invisible Unicode. It removes a thing that was never there. Reviewers who tested that whole category found most of them normalize punctuation and hand you back an M dash. That's the product. The second assumption is style detection. GPT-0, Pangram, Turnitin. No key, no math from the model, just a classifier reading tells. That's a handwriting expert. A watermark is a serial number stamped at the factory. Completely different claims, and people mash them together constantly. The real mechanism is called tournament sampling, and Anthropic confirmed on August 14th that it's using a version of Synth ID text, published by Google DeepMind in Nature in 2024. It self-descended from a proposal Scott Aronson made at OpenAI in 2022, which matters, because up until that post, nobody outside Anthropic knew. Every explainer published in that first week, including the biggest video on this topic, was reasoning from the outside. Here's the tournament. Say the plausible next words are big, large, huge, vast. Instead of drawing one by the odds, the sampler runs a knockout bracket. Each match is decided by a hidden score derived from the key plus the preceding few tokens. Researchers at Zurich who pulled the scheme apart described the production configuration as a hash over the previous 3 tokens, plus a widened context window, plus the tournament, plus a caching layer. The winner of the bracket is your next word. And then the key reshuffles, because it's mixed with the words just written. Next fork, large and huge are the favorites and big is out. No word is permanently preferred. Run it for 1,000,000 steps and big appears exactly as often as it would have with no watermark at all. This is the part people get wrong. The watermark does not shift Claude's word distribution. It preserves it. What it changes is which of the equally good words wins, in a pattern that one specific key can reproduce. DeepMind put this in front of real users. Nearly 20 million Gemini responses, half watermarked, half not, compared on user ratings. No statistically significant difference. Side-by-side human raters saw nothing. Detection runs the same machine backwards, and it needs no database and no copy of the model. You slide along the text, rederive what the hidden scores would have been at each position, and check whether the word actually sitting there scored high. In human writing, that's a coin flip, about half score high by luck. In keyed text, it runs above half, never on one word, only summed across hundreds, which brings us to the number Anthropic did not publish. There is no stated minimum length, no threshold, no false positive rate, no accuracy figure of any kind. Practitioners guess a floor somewhere around 100 to 300 words. The academic follow-up work suggests marks survive to roughly 800 tokens on average, even under aggressive human paraphrasing. Google's own supplementary material reported watermark AUC dropping to 0.7 at 1,000 tokens once you paraphrase. Anthropic has matched none of that with numbers of its own, and it's been 6 days. And there is a real false positive mechanism nobody is talking about, documented back in the original 2023 watermarking paper. The hidden score depends on the preceding few words. English reuses word pairs constantly, so a repeated phrase hashes to the same verdict every single time and keeps collecting the same result, which means highly repetitive prose can produce a confident-looking signal out of nothing. One writer building a toy version of this watched their own handwritten blog posts light up red on every other word. Now the line for the developers watching, because there's one in Anthropic's docs that's been sitting there for months. Temperature, top P, and top K are not supported on Claude 4.7 and later. Set them to anything non-default, and you get a 400. Anthropic's guidance is to omit them and use prompting instead. No reason given. A developer on Hacker News read the watermarking post and connected those two facts in one sentence. And I want to be careful here, because that's an inference and not Anthropic's stated cause. Reasoning models had been dropping temperature controls before any of this landed, so the timing proves nothing on its own. But the structural point survives regardless of motive. If the watermark lives in the sampler, then the sampler is now a compliance surface. And compliance surfaces don't get user-facing knobs. Give the thing its due, and sincerely, because most of the outrage is aimed at the wrong target. The watermark is genuinely free. No extra tokens, no price change, negligible latency, nothing added to your text. It does not identify you. There's no user ID in it. And Anthropic did something almost no AI detection vendor does, which is write down what its own tool cannot prove. It cannot confirm human authorship, cannot tell you which AI wrote something else, and their words cannot distinguish Claude wrote this from Claude heavily edited this. That's more honesty than any classifier that's ever flagged a student. It also exists for 2 reasons, and only one gets mentioned. The stated one is Article 50 of the EU AI Act, applicable August 2nd, plus a transparency code with roughly 190 signatories that Anthropic, Google, OpenAI, Meta, Microsoft, and Mistral have all signed. The unstated one is training data. If you're a lab, a watermark is a filter, the only reliable way to keep your own model's output from being scraped back into your next model's diet. That's an incentive worth naming out loud, because it means this feature would probably exist, even if Brussels had never written a word. But the fight everybody is having, can I take it off, is the wrong fight. And it's the wrong fight, because the answer is boring. Yes, trivially. The Zurich team measured scrubbing success above 90% using nothing but an off-the-shelf paraphraser, no cleverness required. And here's the uncomfortable bit. Each of the design choices that make synth ID text harder to forge, the wider context window, the tournament, the caching, made it easier to wash off. That is a real engineering trade-off, and it went in a direction most coverage assumes it didn't. The risk that actually matters runs the other way. In 2024, a research group showed you can query a watermarked model's API enough times to approximately reverse engineer its watermark and then stamp it onto text you wrote yourself. For under $50, with over 80% success against schemes previously considered safe. Against synth ID text, specifically, the design holds up much better. Spoofing success collapses to 4%, but triple the attacker's query budget, and it climbs back to 15%. And 15% is not 0. Hold that thought, because it inverts the whole panic. Everyone is worried about a cheating student getting caught. The failure mode with teeth is a mark showing up on a paragraph a human actually wrote in a disciplinary hearing with a detector that publishes no error rate. To be fair to the defenders, forged watermarks leave clues. The same lab built a detector for spoofing attempts, calibrated it across more than 2,000 of them, and it gets stronger the longer the text. So this is an arms race with a scoreboard, not a cliff. All of it, though, was measured on a 7 billion parameter open model on a lab bench, not on Claude. Treat those numbers as the shape of the problem, not as measurements of the thing you're using. And here's the contradiction nobody has flagged. The EU law carves out standard editing, spelling, grammar, translation, as not requiring a mark. Anthropic watermarks translation anyway, and says the mark on a translation is strong, because every word in the output was chosen by Claude. Meanwhile, the case everyone is actually panicking about, the light copy edit, is the case Anthropic says may leave too few corrections to register at all. So the exemptions in the law and the strengths of the technology point in opposite directions. The thing the law says you needn't mark gets marked hardest. The thing people are afraid of is where the mark is weakest. One more distinction, because these two get merged in every thread. The embedded text watermark and the C2 Pascal's file signature are different mechanisms with opposite failure modes. The word choice mark survives copy-paste and dies to rewriting. The file signature .cvg, .eng, .jpeg only survives rewriting and dies to a screenshot, a format conversion, or a resave. And if you're running Claude through Bedrock, Google Cloud, or Microsoft Foundry, Anthropic says the embedded watermark applies, but signed provenance metadata may not be supported on every platform. So your enterprise deployment may be carrying half of this scheme. Worth checking rather than assuming. Practically, then. Stop buying removal tools. There is no public detector, which means no vendor on earth can currently demonstrate their product works, and a market where nobody can measure the outcome is a market-selling belief. Don't do character swaps. Mixed script text has been a spam signal for years, and it breaks tokenization, so you'd be damaging real pages to hide from a consequence nobody has demonstrated. If you have a legitimate need for unmarked output, run an open weight model locally. This mark lives in the sampler, not in the weights, so whoever controls the sampler controls the mark, and locally, that's you. If you publish for a living, keep your drafts and your version history, because that is the only real defense against a forged mark, and it's the same defense that worked before any of this existed. And watch for exactly one dated thing, the detection API. Until it ships, every claim about this watermark, for it or against it, is unfalsifiable. The panic assumes a machine that can tell whether a human wrote something. That machine doesn't exist, and this isn't it. What Anthropic built answers one narrow question. Did these words come out of our sampler? And it answers it well when you gave the model room to choose, and not at all when you didn't. It cannot see your intent, your effort, or the 3 hours you spent on the paragraph before you asked for help with the grammar. Because in the end, there's only so much you can prove about a choice that was never really a choice. You can't hide a message in a die with one face.